Here is a demonstration of the criteria for your final Web-1 assignment. I've got it open currently in a browser and I'm just going to go through it. It's a 3-page assignment, and let me just go from top to bottom here on the first page. You will have a little mini navigation system to link to each of the 3 pages, and that will be 3 separate graphics inside of a table. Now if you want to have a border on it, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine as well. But each one of these links to each of the separate pages. So if I can just click on these, and I'll come back to this. Page 2, page 3, and back to the home page. What you should do is create your first page and complete the table with the graphics and the navigation, and then save that as your second and third pages. That way you will already have the navigation done. I suppose you can always copy and paste as well, but I want the same common navigation in all 3 pages. Okay, so back to the home page here. So the top level will be a table with 3 graphics here. Now let me quickly jump over to Photoshop. I want you to create these graphics on your own as Photoshop elements, either as a JPEG or a PNG. I've got a model here to demonstrate how you can do it. Just have a background. It could be an image, it could be a color, you could put gradients in there. I've just kept it as a flat color. And for my first button, I have the word home, and it can show you that on and off, and then duplicated that layer and then just edited the text for the second one to be saying page 2, and the third one says page 3. So the idea here is this is your source file, and if I can, I'll just quickly go up to image size here. I've made mine 100 by 75 pixels. I recommend somewhere in that range, but I won't dictate those numbers exactly, but keep it under 100 pixels square as a limit. Okay, so that's the file size. And then once one of these labels is on there, you're just going to go File, Export. And export as is fine usually. And either pick PNG or JPEG. And give them decent names, so maybe home.jpg, page2.jpg, page3.jpg. Once you've exported those, you will put them in your images folder. So let me show you the root folder right here. Okay, so I do want you to have a similar structure here, and a folder for your images. And you can see these images here that I have, and these are the buttons that I'm having you create on your own. Okay, I will provide these other images, but you are also free to use your own as well. Okay, and then a folder for your CSS file. And there you can see your 3 HTML files at the root level. So that's the directory structure I want you to adhere to. Okay, so let's just quickly go back to Dreamweaver now. Actually, I'll go back to the browser and go over some of the other content. So that's the navigation bar at the top. One table with 1 row and 3 columns. And each one of these table cells has a graphic, which you will create. And then ultimately, you'll make those images also act as links to the other pages. Then after that, on a new line, put your first and last name, create an H1 tag around those. Then on a new line below that, create a paragraph, even if you have to repeat the sentence a number of times. But I'm saying a brief description why you chose animation and game, and make that a paragraph. So you can give me a little 2-sentence story and then duplicate it if you like. I'll leave that up to you. But I do want you to give me an example of some bold text within that paragraph. And then the next element below is a table with 1 row and 2 columns. In the left column, I'd like you to create an image, preferably 300 by 300 pixels. And in the right column, I'd like you to put a title using H2 tags and a list with 3 elements in the list. I put 3 reasons to hire me. Honestly, if you want to do something different, feel free to do so, but an H2 title and at least a 3-line items list. Okay. On that, you're going to create some CSS, but I'll come back to that shortly. The final element on the page is a simple hypertext link to an external site of your choosing. So now let's talk about the CSS. I'm going to jump over to, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go to page 2 and talk about content. 3 div tags to hold these images, and you're going to use absolute positioned CSS to put those on the page in unique positions. And then the third page, I'm just going to demonstrate this. I want you to create, again, another div tag here. And as the page opens and closes, expands and contracts on its width, I want you to keep that element as 50% width. So that's also going to need to be done with CSS. So let's get into the CSS in a little more detail here. I'm going to briefly describe it. I do want you to style the H1 tag with a selector for H1s and just apply a color and a size that's larger than its natural size. If I jump over to Dreamweaver, maybe we can talk around it on Dreamweaver here. So I do have the page open here, as you can see, and I am on my CSS Designer panel. There's the external CSS file that you'll need to create, right? And that should go in the CSS folder, as we've always done. And here are all the styles that I'm asking you to create. So the first three are all selectors. There's one for the body, one for the H1, and one for the images. And I'll explain the image one momentarily. I have 2 class styles that I want you to create, and then 3 IDs. Okay, so let me go one by one. So for the body tag, we're just going to attach a background color, and that's this aqua color that I have back here. And you can see it here in my properties. Okay, actually, also, yes, I didn't realize I'm going to have you also create a default font family. I chose Arial Century Sans Serif. Choose one of anyone that you like, but do set a font family and a background color and attribute that to the body selector. Okay. The next one down is the H1, and that's referring to the name here, which is surrounded by H1 tags. Just to create, again, a color and a font size. Make the size bigger than the natural H1 size. So go even bigger than its natural size. This third one here is called image. Now, it's for the image, but it's kind of a custom thing, and it's a subtle thing. But you're going to notice when you put this image inside of a table, because this is a table with 1 row and 2 columns, if you just put an image in a table, and particularly if you see a border around it, there's going to be a gap along the bottom. Long story short, images are regarded just as like another character in a line of text. And they're inline elements. So that means that there's this thing called a baseline, and there is a default in the browser engines that leaves a little space at the bottom for the baseline. So to make it not appear when we have an image in a table in particular, I've used the image selector, so it'll apply to all images. And there is, in layouts, there is a display property, and set it to block. Okay, display element equals block. And that will get rid of that little gap. It's subtle, but again, not so subtle. And that's something we may have barely talked about in class, but that's the trick for that. So I'm going to just explain that right here and now. Okay. Now on this table as well, we are going to attach a class style. So if I actually click on this table here, and I'm going to click on the table in my selector down here, you'll notice down here, dot profile. So we're going to attach the class to the table. Now if I click on that, you can see the properties. It's just for creating a border. So the width, the style, and the color are being defined in the class style, and I called mine dot profile. Okay, so that will have to be applied to the table itself. And that's where that red border comes from. Now to get this background color in the table cell, I did that through my properties, and of course I already have it docked down here. If you don't have your properties available, you always can find it in your window panel here. And just drag it to the bottom till the line turns blue and it docks. But it's a shortened panel right now, so if you're not aware of that, you can click this little arrow actually, and it expands it and gives me access to these extra properties here. So that's how I got my text to be centered. I just click inside the table data, and the best way to do that actually is to go down to your tag selector and click TD, and that affects everything in that table cell. And here you notice I set my horizontal to center, and I pick the background color through the color picker, and that's how you can set your particulars for every table cell. Okay, you may again have to click this little arrow to expand your properties to gain access to that extra section. Okay, and again, let's keep going down the list here. So div stretch, that has to do with page 3, so I'll skip that. Let's skip over to page 2. And what I have here are 3 images, and each image will have an ID attributed to it. If I click on one here, for example, you can see the ID down here, dog01, and that one's called dog02, and that one's called dog03. And I've created an ID in my style sheet. And if you look at the shortened lists here, position, it's shortened here, but it's absolute position, 150 pixels from the top, and that first one is 20 pixels from the left. So as I move over to the different images, for example, dog 2, on dog 2, I have it consistently 150 pixels from the top, but this one I allowed to make sure it cleared the first image, so I threw it over by 350 pixels. And then the last one, I put it at 700 pixels from the left. So to maintain them on the same line, I kept the distance from the top consistent. Now you don't have to do that. If you want to put them on a diagonal line or something, that's fine. If you want to even have some slight overlap, that's fine as well. Okay, it's about your intention and the design to follow suit. So positions are absolute on all 3 of these, so that's going to require 3 ID styles to address each image with its own unique absolute positioned settings in CSS. Okay, so that's page 2. Now let's finally go to page 3, which is really just a div tag, and we're decorating the div tag with a background color and a border color, you know, with a certain thickness. Just have your name in there inside of an H2 tag, and we're going to control the width using percentages. So again, the shortened list over here for this class I've called div stretch is width is 50%. All right, percentage is the main thing here. Height 250 pixels. Position absolute. Again, I dropped this one 150 pixels from the top and left everything else set to auto. And then down in my borders, 10 pixel border, solid with this magenta color. And then the background color was set to that sky blue. So if I just run this in the browser really fast, the idea is that stretches when the browser width stretches. Okay, and that's pretty well it. So page 3 has the stretchy div tag with the decorated border and a background color and your name inside of that div tag using H2 tags. The second page will have 3 elements, 3 images, and you will just position those using the absolute position settings and specific top and left side settings. And that's all in your CSS. And then finally on the home page, your name in H1 tags, a paragraph below that with some text elements that are bold. So just give me a little description of why you chose animation in game and put it in a paragraph. Below that, another table with 1 row, 2 columns, an image of your choosing on the left. If you want to put your image in, that's fine. If not, anything will be fine. I'm suggesting 300 by 300 pixels. And then in the right column, you will have a heading with H2 and a minimum of 3 line items inside of a list. And I've centered mine again using the properties panel. And I actually set a background color as well in that table cell using my properties panel. Now the border is being dictated by CSS, and that will be a class style that is attributed to this particular table. Then finally, a simple hypertext link linking to an external website. Okay, and just zip that all up and hand that in for your final, and that is your final assignment. Altogether, it's worth 20%. Okay, the next few classes are work periods to work on this, and I will be available to help. Again, that is your Web 1 final assignment for this semester.